Erica, thank you for setting this up and for the introduction. So guys, most of you know me. So for those that don't, Sam Summers, partner at Sihle Insurance Group, are a full service, privately held insurance agency. I personally specialize in all the commercial stuff, but we can handle anything you need from personal lines to bonds to you name it. If it has anything to do with insurance, we've got a department for it. So why we're meeting here today is to specifically address cyber liability. Typically, when you're speaking with, Travis and I were just talking about this. Typically, when you as a business owner, when you think about insurance, you think about your general liability, you think about your work comp, you think about the things that are absolutely required of you. The reality of the situation is it's 2020, and cyber threats are probably more prevalent than about anything else you'll come across. If you've got a website, you've got exposure. 2020, everybody's got a cell phone in your pocket. We're all constantly tuned in. So Travis is a representative from Evolve MGA that been voted the #1 cyber MGA in the country for 2, 3, 4 years now, something like that. And he's not only a friend but a great resource and one of the more knowledgeable people I know when it comes to any kind of cyber exposure, cyber incident. So he's gracious enough to join us in here today and fill us in on some tips and some general things to look out for when it comes to cyber. I think we're going to go through some slides and go over some general information, maybe some claim scenarios, and we hope to kind of open up the portal at the end of this to go over some questions and answers. So if you have anything, feel free to either add them into the chat or hold on to those questions for afterwards. Travis?
Floor is mine. All right. Well, Sam, thank you so much. Erica, thank you so much. I hope everyone's having a great Wednesday morning. I'm going to share my screen real quick. And then we should be good. Sam, can you confirm that you can see that?
I can see it.
Perfect. So my name is
Lloyd's of London.
Yes, that is Lloyd's of London. We are a cyber MGA, Evolve MGA, cyber liability MGA. All we focus on is cyber liability. So cyber insurance, hacker insurance, right? And to Sam's point, what we're going to do today, I have a brief agenda. We'll keep it relatively mild. If you have any questions, please shoot it through the chat box. If not, you can hold on to your questions till the end and we'll do our best to answer those for you. What we're going to talk about though is how to survive a hack attack or how advanced hackers are getting, right? COVID-19 has caused a variety of issues from our side of things because of the remote working activity that has taken place since March. Opened up a whole can of vulnerabilities that hackers have been exploiting over the last 8 months. Talk about a few claims examples. I tried to throw in a few different industries there. I know that we have a variety of different industries over the call, so I will do my best to make those somewhat generalized examples that pertain to majority of the industries and companies that are on this call currently. And then best practices. We'll keep it brief, but we'll also walk through some of the best practices you can put in place when you are protecting your home office if you're still working remotely, or when you are protecting your business, right? And then why a cyber policy. Always things to be considering is average cost of a cyber policy is still relatively inexpensive compared to the total cost of the claims that we're going to walk through. So always consider having a cyber policy in place, and we'll discuss that as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in. This right here, I love starting off with this. How advanced are hackers getting? This is my spooky side. It's designed to scare you guys, right? Well, when you talk about how advanced hackers are getting, we sat through a presentation from Cyber Risk Aware, which is a panel provider that we utilize for an intentional phishing platform. And they gave us a presentation, and in that presentation, they shared some pictures of the dark web. So I'm sure you've heard of the dark web. This is where hackers go to buy, sell, trade sensitive information. But the preface of this is, how advanced are hackers getting? Well, welcome to the online marketplace for hackers. What you see here is an example of a dark web page that hackers can access, where they are able to go onto the dark web and actually purchase different hacking kits. So believe it or not, as you see here, they can select the different types of hacking kits or malicious software that they would like to purchase with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. What I find ironic about this page is when you look at the top left here, you'll actually see that there's a support hotline. So I guess if you're having issues during your checkout process, you can reach out to the support hotline and they'd be happy to help you through that process. But regardless, hackers are able to buy malicious software, hacking kits on the dark web utilizing cryptocurrency, which is an untraceable form of currency. Now, how do they manage their activities? Every single one of your businesses has some form of a third-party management software or a management software that organizes your everyday accounts, your information pertaining to your business. Well, so do hackers. And when you look at this here, you're looking at a third-party management system that hackers are able to access once again via the dark web, and they pay monthly or annual subscriptions for these services to organize their hacking activities, paying that in cryptocurrency. So let's walk through this real quick. When you look at this, 10.32% is the overall penetration, let's say success rate that the hackers are having with their malicious software and hacking attacks. You work down the page on the left side there and you'll see the different browsers, Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari, that they're having better success rate based off of the blue bar that you see to the right. The bottom, operating systems, Windows 2003, Windows XP, the top right, different strands of malicious software that are having better success. And then the bottom right, you'll see all of the different countries that this hacker is targeting and is able to monitor the success of their hacking attempts based on this third-party system that they are utilizing. Very scary stuff. So what happens when a hacker steals your sensitive information? Well, they may rip 100,000 credit cards. They may pull social security numbers, Amazon credentials, login credentials, you name it. When they pull large bulks of information, they're able to mass upload those login credentials or those credit card numbers, et cetera, into online checkers that they have. And from there, they're able to know in a matter of minutes whether or not those accounts, credit card numbers, et cetera, are still active. So it's alarming, right? Because when they're able to determine whether or not that credit card is still active, you better believe they're going to continue to purchase items using those credit cards or using those login credentials, et cetera. So when you look at that, online marketplaces for hackers on the dark web combined with third-party management systems that manage and organize their hacking activities. And then when they steal your information here, you're looking at a quick way for them to determine whether or not those accounts, credit card numbers, or more are still active. We're living in a different era. So why are hacks increasing? Well, since March, Evolve has seen about a 30% increase in claims. It's been pretty significant for us because a lot of the remote working activities, caused a wide variety of different vulnerabilities that hackers have been exploiting. Not to mention, right, that telework activity drives a higher percentage of malicious software growth. So hackers have been creating more types of malicious software. The phishing attempts from hackers, and phishing means that they are sending emails designed to trick you to click on hyperlinks. They have gotten very calculated with their approaches. And what you've seen in recent months, over the last 4, 5, 6 months, is they've created fake domain names, all designed to trick you on the current topics. Examples, COVID, right? Examples, the election that we're currently about to experience. The CDC, the World Health Organization, right? They're getting very targeted with their approaches. And because of that, you're finding that a lot more people are willing to click on that, believing that that email is generating legitimate information pertaining to those reliable sources. So let's look at an online scan that we found. This is from the mediatrust.com. They put this out a few months back. And what this is demonstrating here, because we're talking about remote working activity and the increase in cyber attacks stemming from that. This is showing us here the amount of malicious software that was detected on home internet provider systems. And when you look at this, we start this at January of 2020 and keeps very flat until right around February 19th of this year. Well, why is that? That's because February 19th is when mandates requiring remote working, requiring quarantines started taking place in the United States. And as you can tell, AT&T, Comcast, T-Mobile, Verizon, all of the major internet at-home providers saw a major uptick starting on February 19th with the amount of malicious software found on their home internet systems. So scary, scary stuff. Now, as I mentioned, we're living in a different era. Let's talk about some statistics that pertain directly to cyber attacks taking place in the United States. And I will tell you, these statistics are from the FBI report that was either given at the end of 2018 or 2019. The 2019 Internet Crimes Report is the most up-to-date report that we have from the FBI. At the end of 2020, we will then be given the 2020 Internet Crimes Report. So when you look at this, a lot of companies out there do not believe that they have a cyber exposure because they do not have high volumes of sensitive information. If you do, then you absolutely have a cyber exposure. But I'm here today to tell you that we need to quit the notion of thinking that cyber liability pertains strictly to companies with higher volumes of information. And here's the statistics to prove that. In 2018, it was reported to the FBI that there was less than 6,000 data breaches reported to the FBI. Scroll just below that. The number of ransomware attacks that on average take place daily in the United States is around 4,000 a day. That is a significantly different number, and that is an alarming statistic when you start to look at the total costs that you saw at the end of 2019. So according to the FBI, in 2019, the United States experienced roughly $3.5 billion in damages in total losses stemming from cyber events in the United States. Let's break those out. There was 114,000 phishing attacks that were reported to the FBI in 2019. And then you look at the estimated losses surrounding business email compromise. Well, business email compromise is where hackers steal your login credentials to log into your Outlook account or your Gmail account or your cloud provider to view the information that you have on your clients. Business email compromise, right, cost the United States roughly $1.7 billion in damage last year. So that's roughly half of the $3.5 billion in total losses that the United States experienced last year stemming from cyber events. Staggering numbers. Now, let's focus on Florida. Florida was number 2. This is not a competition we want to win, right? But Florida was number 2 last year in 2019 surrounding total losses stemming from cyber attacks. So last year alone, we experienced $293 million in losses on commercial entities stemming from cyber attacks. All based off of the FBI report. You look at this, we were number 2 in the nation behind California. We had 27,000 complaints, meaning affected individuals. The growth over the last 4 years has been tremendous. So things are clearly trending in a negative area in the sense that these commercial entities are experiencing more and more losses each and every year as they become affected with these different cyber attacks. And what we have seen is the severity of cyber attacks has dramatically increased year over year. And that's because malicious software is becoming more complex, which requires more attention after the event takes place, more forensics help, more help on the data breach attorney side of things. And then in result, hourly billables are going up on the average cost per claim. The issues are taking longer to resolve. And once again, we're starting to see claims in the average cost per claim slowly creep up on the insurance side of things. So let's take a guess real quick. What percentage of cyber events took months or longer to discover? And this is according to the Verizon 2019 Data Breach Investigations Report. 68% of the events that they recorded on that report took months or longer to discover. So what does that mean? That means that hackers, especially when you're looking at that $1.7 billion in losses stemming from business email compromises, hackers stealing your login credentials to your Outlook account, are spending months in your Outlook account prior to detection. We had a forensics firm that told us the average amount of time that hackers were sitting dormant in a computer system prior to detection was 197 days. That's from Crypsis, which is a forensics firm that we work with. But 197 days is north of 6 months. Well, the common perception is that only cyber events take place on large companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies. We've heard about the Equifax. We've heard about the Target breach. We've heard about the Sony attack, LinkedIn, et cetera. Well, 62% of all attacks are on the small to mid-sized businesses. So when you really focus on that, that means overwhelming amount of attacks that are taking place, that 4,000 ransomware attacks a day in the United States. If you average that out, 62% of those technically would be on the small to mid-sized businesses. So when we talk about the types of claims that we see, we talk about two primary claims. What are those? Ransomware, which we have seen a huge uptick in ransomware claims this year, and social engineering, which is fraudulent wire transfers and deception surrounding tricking someone to send a fraudulent wire transfer. But what does all that stem from? The number one way that hackers steal sensitive information and successfully implement these cyber attacks is what? Human error. That is the tackiest slide that I have in this presentation. But when you look at this, right? Human error. They clicked on a hyperlink. They wired money out the front door without doing their due diligence to confirm the authenticity of that wire transfer request. Human error is the biggest driver to the claims that we are seeing on an everyday basis right now. So, ransomware, the number one claim that we deal with, roughly 35% of Evolve's claims are ransomware. That came from our 2019 report and our claims side of things. I would be willing to bet, given what has taken place so far this year, that that number will increase going into 2021 based off of the 2020 findings. I would think we're probably going to be closer to 40%, but I won't know until the end of this year. But regardless, 35% of Evolve's claims stem from ransomware. Now, what is ransomware? We'll keep this very high level real quick. When you look at ransomware, you click on an attachment or a hyperlink, malicious software is downloaded into your computer system. You come back to work the next day and you see a big red box on your screen or something of that nature that is requiring you to pay a certain amount of cryptocurrency, typically Bitcoin, in order for the hackers to release your systems back to you or information back to you. Now, let's look at an example here. And this was a claim that I had on my book of business, and I have been handling this along with our claims team for the last month or so. It looks like we're finally getting things wrapped up. A few months back, we had a wholesaler with 19 million in revenue. They experienced a ransomware attack. So in this scenario, malicious software was downloaded into their systems. Hackers held their entire network hostage. According to our forensics firms, it hit the backups, the malicious software did. It hit the entire network. So we were dead in the water. Now, hackers demanded roughly $95,000 in cryptocurrency. Forensics negotiated this ransom demand down to around $60,000. So a lot of times we're asked whether or not our forensics firms will negotiate with these hackers to try to get that ransom demand down. And it is a very case-by-case basis. But know that we must exhaust every option out there to try to remove that malicious software or to try to reset their systems to their backups prior to entering into any type of negotiation to try to get their systems back. In this scenario, we were successful in getting it down around $35,000. The hackers then received $60,000 in Bitcoin. And from there, what a lot of people don't realize is ransomware is just the tip of the iceberg. After we got their systems back, there was still a wide variety of different areas to their network that were still affected from that malicious software. And so because of that, the firm, this wholesaler, was not able to process their systems or access their systems to process orders, take in orders, etc. And because of that, we for a minute there thought that we could potentially lose a contract with Home Depot, which happened to be this wholesaler's largest client. So competitive cyber policies, and excuse the alarms going on behind me. We do live right next to a fire station. But very competitive cyber policies will provide coverage for what's called reputational harm, which what does that mean? What that means is that the policy will provide coverage for the lost income stemming from losing a current or future client because of that cyber event. So in this scenario, if this wholesaler, 19 million in revenue, were to lose the contract that they had in place with Home Depot, and it was because they were not able to process the orders to fulfill that contract, the policy is designed to respond to cover the lost income from losing that client of the insured, which is very competitive language. The average ransom demand so far this year has drastically increased. We've seen a few different reports, but everything is pointing in the direction that the average ransom demand that hackers are asking for is north of $100,000. And I have a graph based off of an industry report from another cyber MGA that displays here the average cost of ransomware based off of the type of ransomware that is found on your systems. So when you look at this here, Maze, Ryuk, $420,000 on average is what they are finding if you are hit with this type of malicious software. Now, people ask us, why is that the case? Why is it more expensive than, let's say, the Dharma or other versions of ransomware? Well, the simple answer to that is all of these have different capabilities. So Maze, Ryuk are some of the more complex types of malicious software. So what that simply means is they can do all different kinds of things once they have access to your network. And because of that, they're able to ask a much higher premium to release your systems back to you because they have access to do a lot more damage based off of the type of capabilities that that ransomware has. But how scary is that? You look at $420,000 being the tip of the iceberg, and then at the bottom here, roughly $70,000 is what the more simplistic types of ransomware are still demanding on an average basis. Think about that. Would you have $60, $70, $80, maybe $100,000 ready to rock and roll in the event that your systems were compromised by a ransomware attack? Would you know who to call as far as forensics go to successfully remove this malicious software and get you back up and running quicker than 2 to 3 weeks of downtime? These are the type of questions that you need to be asking yourselves. And these are the type of questions that a cyber policy can help proactively prepare you for. Now, number 2 claim that we see is social engineering. Social engineering is more of a buzzword, okay? And what it really is it's gaining unauthorized information or potentially electronic funds, right, by deception, by tricking someone to send you that information. Now, majority of policies out there will provide coverage for this. And there's 2 scenarios that typically take place where coverage can be provided. And we'll touch on both of them real quick. The first party social engineering coverage, which is where the insured gets tricked into wiring money to a fraudulent third-party bank account. This happens all the time. This is the number 2 claim that we see. Last year, it made up around 26% of the claims that our claims team handled. So in this scenario here, we had a restaurant group. They were tricked into wiring $35,000 to whom they thought was a contractor who had recently completed work for their restaurant. Now, in this scenario, what I find really interesting about this is the contractor sent over the $35,000 invoice to the restaurant group who was the insured. And hackers had been sitting dormant in the CFO's email for some time. And as soon as that invoice had hit the inbox, they were able to quickly remove it, change up the invoice, so manipulate that invoice, changing the routing numbers, et cetera, put it back into the inbox before the CFO even knew what happened. So in this scenario, the CFO logs into his Outlook account, reviews the information, sees the invoice. It's the same amount. The only thing that has changed is potentially the routing number, and wired $35,000 to a fraudulent third-party bank account and didn't even know what hit him until he received a follow-up from the contractor saying, hey, we still have not been paid for our work. Competitive cyber policies out there will provide coverage to reimburse the insured, AKA the restaurant group here, for that fraudulent wire transfer. The second example that I'll give you real quick, we had an HVAC contractor whose login credentials, once again, you're starting to see a commonplace with login credentials being compromised. But hackers stole the login credentials of an HVAC contractor here. And while they were in the HVAC contractor's email, they sent emails out to the clients of the contractor, and they were successfully able to trick a client of this HVAC contractor to wire $22,000 to whom they thought was our insured, the HVAC contractor. So there are policies out there that will actually reimburse the client of the insured for wiring money to a fraudulent third-party bank account if the cyber event, which is here, the business email compromise, took place on the insured's systems. So in this scenario, once again, the insured was the HVAC contractor. They suffered a business email compromise. Hackers were posing as the HVAC contractor and sending emails to their clients requesting wire transfers. One of their clients wired $22,000 to whom they thought was the HVAC contractor, and it ended up being a hacker. Competitive policies will respond to provide coverage for that $22,000 fraudulent wire transfer. Now, the last example that I will give you pertains to third-party liability when we're talking about cyber. And what does that mean? Well, I saw a university on the call today. This applies directly to companies like universities, school districts, companies with high volumes of sensitive information, companies that have remote access to third parties' networks or systems. So third-party liability, when we are talking about cyber, stems to two items: privacy liability, which is where the insured is responsible for losing the sensitive information on their client's behalf, and they are now being sued for losing that information. Pertaining directly to universities, schools, you have high volumes of information. If you were responsible for losing that sensitive information, you better believe there will likely be a lawsuit directed at the university for losing that sensitive information. Another example, right, is network security liability, which is where you are responsible, the insured is responsible for passing malicious software off to a third party, and that third party is now suing the insured. So third-party liability encompasses those two main components. And in this example that I'm about to share with you, it actually breaks down to both of those components stemming from one cyber attack, which is really, really unique. So in this scenario here, we had a contractor. This was not an insured of Evolve. Let me clarify. You can find this claim example online. But there was a contractor who had remote access to a water utility treatment plant. And what he was able to accomplish with that remote access was changing the different types of chemicals in the water utility, at the water utility plant. Because of that remote access, hackers were successful in hacking this contractor. And what they were able to do is pass the malicious software off to the water utility company. And from there, hackers were successful in changing the amount of chemicals to an unsafe level in tap water. That is very scary. That same attack was responsible for stealing the PII, which is personally identifiable information. So the hackers not only successfully hacked through the contractor, the water utility company, and changed the chemicals in tap water, but in this scenario, they were also able to hack the database that the water utility company had of clients' information, which resulted in a privacy breach, in addition to hackers changing the chemicals in tap water. Unique scenario. This is why there are the liability portions of the cyber policies for lawsuits that are directed at you for network security liability and privacy liability. But as I mentioned prior, when you look at data breaches, when you look at network security liability issues, those really do not make up the bulk of the amount of claims that we have seen. So, how do we survive these hack attacks? It's very simple. There's best practices that you can adopt that are going to better your chances of making it through attempts by hackers or a successful cyber event. Let's talk about a couple of them. When you look at best practices, I always summarize it in 4 components. The first is determine your vulnerabilities. Get an idea as to what type of information you have access to. Get an idea of a backup plan as to what you're going to do if an incident happens, right? Determine your vulnerabilities. In a lot of cases, you may not have that great of a firewall in place. You may not have backups taking place to secure your data on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. So determine your vulnerabilities, train your staff. What was the #1 reason hackers are stealing sensitive information? Human error. You could have the best controls, the best practices, security measures in place. But if your employee clicks on a hyperlink that they should not be clicking on, that made it through the spam filter, we're looking at a cyber event that could be devastating. And it could be simply from human error. So how do you do this? 2 good ideas. #1, adopt an intentional phishing platform. There's a lot of companies out there. For example, we utilize a company called Cyber Risk Aware. Another company is called Know4. They will send intentional emails designed to trick your employees to click on a hyperlink or an attachment. If they do, it prompts them through a quick little training session, and it will notify the individual in the office who set it up. In addition to that, there are companies like Ninjio and other companies that will send gamified videos out once a month to your employees, training them on current cyber trends that they are seeing. The constant education, the training, is all designed to build what we like to call the human firewall. And at the end of the day, majority of claims are still stemming from human error. It's not necessarily hackers just bullying their way through a firewall, through controls that you have in place. It's stemming from the human error aspect. Third, have an incident response plan in place. Know exactly what to do when an attack happens. Okay, that may sound so simple, but the reality is majority of companies do not have that in place. So what does that mean? That simply means, who do I call when a cyber attack takes place? If you have a cyber policy in place, work with your insurance agent to make sure that you have the hotlines for their incident response team lined up, a paper copy, a copy in files, and written on your desk somewhere. Whatever is easiest for you to remember it, that is going to be great. In addition to that, know exactly who to call. So that way, once you call the incident response hotline, you now know the steps that they are going to want to take to make sure that you are going to be back up and running in a timely manner. And the last item is actively monitor your systems and information. If you don't have, spam filters or things along those lines that are going to try to reduce the amount of potential phishing emails coming into your inbox, I highly recommend you look at that. And a company that I recommend is called Mimecast, Mimecast. That is what we use. They're very good at what they do, and they stop majority of intentional phishing emails or malicious software style emails from hitting your inbox. But I will tell you, we have had an employee of ours click on a malicious software link in the past, and we had to deal with that issue. So it's never perfect, but those are still best practices that you should have in place. Last item. We're almost done here. But securing your home office is almost as important right now as to working or securing your actual physical location. So things that you can do to get an idea as to where you stand on cyber hygiene is what we like to call it, is number one, secure your accounts. The biggest thing that our underwriters are looking for right now is multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. What does that mean? That means that when you go to sign in to your Outlook account or your Gmail account, or a perpetrator is trying to log in to your Outlook account or Gmail account, you will receive a text or a notification on your phone requiring you to confirm the authenticity of that login attempt. And if that is not you logging in, do not confirm it. And that right there just successfully stopped the hacker from stealing your login credentials and successfully logging into your email account. There's statistics out there that show that that can stop up to 99% of attempts by hackers to log into your Outlook account or your business email. Very important. In a lot of cases, that is free to do. Outlook has an application on your phone. Work with your IT staff or your IT team in order to make sure that that is across all of your email accounts, because that is ever so important right now. Secure your devices. Very simple. Pop-up ad blocks, right? Adblock is a good company that can do certain things like that. Turn on antivirus software. Microsoft Defender is a great provider for that. When you're looking at securing different vulnerabilities, different ransomware threats, different phishing threats, right? We always recommend encrypting and backing up your data. Because if we are able to revert your data back to maybe a day or two prior, that is going to save us a lot of time and effort in handling the cyber event that's currently on hand. So backing up your information is incredibly important. And securing vulnerabilities, the last thing I will touch on is anytime that you are getting updates from Microsoft, from Apple for your iPhone updates, do it as quickly as possible. In a lot of those scenarios, they are sending these updates out to you because they are trying to patch old software vulnerabilities. And if you are late to the game when it comes to updating your systems, then you may expose yourself to vulnerabilities that Microsoft, Apple, etc. are trying to cover up and patch. And I'll follow up with this afterwards. All of these that you see in blue here are clickable, and they will take you to an online educational content designed to explain how you can utilize and bring to action these different security measures. Last item that we're going to touch on, I know you guys are probably drooling at this point. I'm trying to keep it interesting. But when you look at why you need cyber insurance, the claims that we have walked through today are designed to provide coverage with a competitive cyber policy. Okay? 96% of the claims that we dealt with in 2019, Evolve's claims, our claims team handled, were first-party related issues, ransomware, social engineering, phishing attacks, etc. Only 4% of those claims stemmed from the liability portions of the policy, the privacy liability, the network security liability portions. So what does that mean? 96% of the cost of claims came directly out of the insured's pockets if they did not have a cyber policy in place. First party coverages cover things like the legal advice, the hourly billables for forensics. Forensics are $300 to $400 an hour right now. Data breach attorneys, if you did lose sensitive information, can be north of $300 to $400. Cybercrime, where we see majority of the claims, cybercrime encompasses the ransomware, the social engineering. And then think about the lost income. What would happen if you experienced 3 weeks of downtime? Could you survive that? Especially if numbers right now are down due to COVID. In addition to that, if you lost one of your largest clients like Home Depot in that example, if the insured had lost that client, do you have a policy in place that will provide coverage for the lost income stemming from that cyber event? So cyber liability is incredibly important. It affects a lot of different companies out there. And I believe I just had a question pop through, so let me do my best to see if I can get that. But I am through with the presentation. I will see. Sam, do you have any clue as to how to read that in the chat box? I don't know if it's coming up for me here.
Lorraine was just saying that that scary, the scary stuff, and that human firewall was a great phrase.
Absolutely, absolutely. The human firewall is everything, right? We see it on a day in, day out basis. Claims are taking place every single day, and it majority of the time is stemming from the human error aspect, which is something that your IT staff cannot necessarily control. But let's open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Sam and I will do our best to answer those for you.
Hey guys, it's Kevin. How y'all doing?
Good, Kevin.
Good. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I do have one question. You had talked about the contractor that had some potential loss of sales with Home Depot. How exactly do you prove that? Because one of the things that you specifically mentioned was not necessarily a direct sale that you have already made, but the loss of potential future sales because of that. So how exactly does an insured prove that to be compensated for it?
Great question, Kevin. We get that ever so often. That's a fantastic question. What it comes down to is we look at previous quarter sales, right? So if we had, for example, a contract with Home Depot that in 2019 brought in $1 million in revenue to the company, when you look at projections, what we do is we bring in a forensic accountant. And the forensic accountant will review previous year's sales, previous year's numbers that similar style clients or similar style contracts have brought in from a revenue and income perspective. And then from there, we can make those adjustments at the loss income that stems from when the cyber event took place for up to a full year after that cyber event happened. So in some scenarios here, we will find that we're actually cutting a check 9, 10, 12 months after the event took place because the indemnity period in our policy is a full 12 months after that cyber event. Our policy is looking to provide coverage for that lost income. But the way that they typically determine the total amount, they'll look at previous year's numbers and try to come up with a competitive number that we think is adequate for the size event that loss or potentially the size client that the insured has lost stemming from that cyber event. Does that work? Make sense?
It does. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Kevin. That was great.
I think a number that you brought up that was really interesting was, the 6,000 attacks a year in 18 and 19, it went up to 4,000 a day. I mean, I feel like that, that's a big eye opener, and so many businesses these days, if you go to a coffee shop or something like that, it's almost expected that you're that you're going to provide, Wi-Fi to people. And so I thought it was good that you're touching on those vulnerabilities as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the numbers, those figures really came from 2019, right? When you look at the $3.5 billion in losses in 2019, I am telling you, based off of what we have seen this year and the increase in claims and the severity of the claims that we have dealt with so far in 2020, you will see significantly higher numbers once we get the end of year report from the FBI, just based off of what we have seen from a marketplace perspective. And even on our end, you're starting to see that certain carriers like AIG, Travelers, Chubb, they're starting to see increases in cyber premiums based off of the losses that have been taking place over the last couple of years. We're feeling it in certain industries like municipalities that we've had on our book. We're starting to see increases because we've dealt with a high number of claims over the last few years. And in a few scenarios, they have been pretty expensive to resolve.
I think there were 10 cities that got hit last year that were constantly in the papers, my hometown being one of them. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
There
was something in Texas, and this number may not be 100% accurate, but it was something around 20 municipalities got hit by one cyber attack in Texas all at the same time. So very scary on the public sector side of things. And why is that? Well, typically they do not necessarily have the best security measures in place due to budget constraints or things along those lines. So we have been seeing municipalities and public sector style entities sustaining significant and severe cyber attacks.
Does anybody else have any questions for, I'm always available to answer anything on an individualized basis after this. I know we're getting, towards the end of our call here, but I'll throw that out there.
Very good. Well, in summary, right, the easy targets are the small to mid-sized businesses. There was $1.7 billion in losses in business email compromise last year. Top two claims are ransomware, social engineering, and hackers will sit dormant in your computer systems. That 197 days came from a statistic directly from one of the forensic firms that we have worked with in the past. And they're anticipating a huge growth in the amount of premium for cyber liability, partially because of rate increases, but also it's estimated that only roughly 30 to 40% of businesses are currently purchasing standalone cyber insurance. So you'll see that this $14 billion in gross written premium on a worldwide basis by 2022 is a pretty high number considering on a worldwide basis right now, I believe we're right around $4 billion. So it's going to continue to grow. It's going to become a type of coverage that's required by contracts that every single business owner out there is going to really need to have in place. Thank you all so much for your time today. I genuinely appreciate it. You guys bringing me on to speak today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis and Sam.